Okay, today we have on steam this 1948 SE2. I've just brought this one to the boil now. It has had thorough lubrication and judging by the water dripping out and the general sound of hissing and sort of in readiness type sounds, I think it is ready to turn over. So let's give it a try. Very smooth little runner, this engine, similar to the SE1 from 1948, which I steamed recently, except slightly longer boiler and obviously the addition of a whistle as well. And as you can see, it's very quiet. As in the 48 SE1, it's a very short stroke engine, so it spins quite quickly. This one's obviously spinning a little slower because it's attached to a period workshop, which is right on period from about 1948. We have a flat base line shaft with a blue oval decal, cast iron supports, which is then driving the correct power press or punch and power hammer. This one's pretty low geared, so it's not going to be turning this over at any great high speed. But as you can see, the 3-wick burner is providing more than enough heat underneath the 160cc boiler to give a reasonable head of steam to drive this simple little workshop over at a realistic speed. It's attached as normal to my usual Meccano L girder type setup, and the flat base makes this very, very simple. The addition of supports for the lamp when refueling and a little holder for the little ton dish is just little extras I like to put on. And I'll say this particular engine dates from about 48. Hot stamped brass engine frame. You can tell it's post-war because it has the words Mamod or Mamod cast into the actual frame itself. Has a simple sort of regulator to control speed, hot stamped brass flywheel, and the simple flat base completes the setup. You will also notice that this particular engine, just like its SE1 counterpart, does not have any superheating. That was not introduced until around 49, when they brought in the longer pressed steel engine frames. This one always has a tendency to prime a little bit, even though the boiler has been filled to the correct level. I tend to find these little engines always prime. Nonetheless, once they've dried out a little bit and there's dry steam coming through into the minute piston, it settles down and runs at sort of a very pleasing sort of rate. The tools as well as the line shaft all have the oiling points. It's a lovely feature which sadly disappeared sometime in the 60s, probably just an extra cost and complication of the manufacturing process, but obviously at this time they were still very much prevalent. There is an oiling hole on the cast frame as well, just makes things a little bit more easier to keep things moving, and it's a nice touch which sadly disappeared, presumably because it just, as I said before, made the production process and the manufacturing process a little bit slower, added to the cost, and invariably Mamod were always looking at ways of keeping the cost of their engines as low as possible so as to maximise profit, no doubt, but at the same time also ensure that the engines were presented to the market at a reasonable cost to the buyer. Don't forget, 1948, England was still very much recovering from the Second World War, and consequently shortages in materials and rationing was still very much prevalent. So receiving an engine like this in your Christmas stocking, a young lad must have really thought that his Christmases had all come at once. The addition of the tools as well would have obviously been much extra expense. This particular engine itself was purchased just over 10 years ago. I think I paid about £115 for it. They seem to be going for a little bit more now these days. As you can see, the lamp does move a little bit because obviously there's no retaining ears on the base plate. The tools themselves were picked up relatively cheaply, and I buy it now on eBay for £11 each. So £33 for all three items was an absolute bargain. I mean, these days now the line shafts themselves are going for upwards of £40. The tools probably 30 to 40. It's difficult to say, but to buy them for that cheap price was a temptation beyond resistance. You can see the engine's running very, very smoothly. It doesn't make a great deal of sound. The tools themselves just turning over at a realistic rate. I think this band here may be a little bit on the tight side for this one, but it runs very smoothly. Ultimately, I'm looking at a cast iron grinder and cast iron frame polisher to complete this outfit for a full 1948 workshop, complete with all the tools. It will be very similar to the old line illustration that you would see on the driving van packets of the period, and also on some of the small promotional leaflets which were put inside the boxes before they were sent out. This particular engine was probably made at the St Mary's Row factory, and so to say, it was in this particular style for around about a year or so, but obviously the engine frames proved a lot more expensive to produce than the pressed steel fares. Don't forget, parts like this were probably bought in partly finished already, because the St Mary's Row factory, which was on the first floor of what was essentially a lovely old Georgian building, was really more or less probably an assembly setup. It wasn't until the Maylins engineers moved to Camden Street that they had a proper factory where they could introduce things like power presses, and then started to introduce raised bases that you can find on these particular tools here. These probably date from about 49. So there you have it, a 1948 SE2 engine, complete with its workshop, still very much in the land of the living. It's a toy that's been looked after, and should you manage to be able to purchase one or get hold of one, I would say it is certainly quite a sought after engine in the actual range of post-war engines. I should add that this particular engine is totally unrestored, so this is exactly as you would have found it when you took it out of its box in 1948. Obviously it's a little bit more play-worn now, so there's been no repainting. The original deco is still very much in existence, and say none of the firebox or anything has been repainted.